Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a really tough story, a fatal shooting involving an ICE agent. And what's really striking is how within just a few hours, two completely different narratives emerged.
All right, let's just jump right in. This is the quote that set everything off, an act of domestic terrorism. I mean, wow, this came directly from the Secretary of Homeland Security literally hours after a 37-year-old mother of three was killed by an ICE agent. That's a huge accusation to make, especially that fast.
So right there, the official government narrative gets locked in. The secretary is basically saying, look, this wasn't just some tragic incident, this was a domestic terrorist trying to kill federal agents, period.
But here's where things get complicated, right? You've got this really stark label, domestic terrorist, and then you have the reality of who this person was, a 37-year-old mom of three. She just dropped her 6-year-old off at school and was just driving home. So you see this massive clash, the official story versus the personal context. And that's really the heart of this whole controversy.
Now get this. The secretary's big, bold statement, it didn't just catch the public off guard. Apparently, it sent shockwaves right through her own department. It created this huge gap between what was being said to the public and what's usually done behind the scenes.
And this slide really lays out that internal conflict perfectly. On one hand, the public gets this rock-solid conclusion just hours after it happened. But behind the scenes, DHS officials are reportedly in sheer surprise, just shocked. You know, the standard playbook is to wait for the investigation, to gather the facts, but this was the total opposite of.
And it wasn't just unnamed sources. Even other top officials, like Tom Homan over at the White House, were pumping the brakes. He's a former law enforcement guy himself, and according to a former ICE official, he was the one saying, hey, let's not rush to judgment here. He was clear that you just can't draw conclusions from a video, which is exactly what the secretary appeared to have done.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit and look at another really specific claim that was made. The idea that the officer followed his training to a T.
Yeah, the secretary was super firm on this. She said, and I'm quoting, "Our officer followed his training, did exactly what he's been taught to do." So the message here is that this wasn't just a heat-of-the-moment thing. It was a by-the-book, textbook response.
Okay, so that naturally leads to the next question, right? What is that training? If he did everything by the book, then what does the book actually say to do in a situation like this?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. According to folks on the inside, standard training involves something called the tactical L. And the whole point of this maneuver, its primary purpose, is to make sure an agent avoids being directly in front of a car. It's a move designed to prevent exactly what ended up happening.
And that lines up with what you hear from other experts, too. Retired police chiefs, tactical trainers, they all say modern policing is all about de-escalation. And a huge part of that is teaching officers, don't put yourself in front of a moving vehicle. It's just a recipe for disaster. It backs you into a corner and raises the stakes for everyone.
So this all brings us back to that initial really powerful phrase, domestic terrorist. Let's talk about why that specific label is so significant and why it set off so many alarm bells for legal experts.
See, the thing is, domestic terrorism isn't just a really strong insult. It's a specific legal term with a very clear definition. It's not just about a violent act. It's about the intent behind that act. Was it meant to intimidate people or to make some kind of political statement? That's what makes it terrorism. And to make a claim like that stick, you need proof. You'd have to know about the person's writings, their statements, their history. You need to know their motive. And that's information that nobody could have had just hours after the shooting. It's a huge leap to make without any of that evidence.
So we've got the official story on one side, and then we have all these challenges from inside and outside the department. So let's look at what we still just don't know, the big critical gaps in the story.
And the list is pretty long. For instance, was there a body camera? Well, ICE agents in that area aren't required to wear them, so we don't know. Here's a big one. Did the driver even see the officer in front of her? She was apparently talking to other agents at her window. And what about the officer's service record? All we've been told is that he's experienced. And was the road even blocked off? Some video shows other cars just driving right on by. There are just so many unanswered questions.
I think what this whole situation really highlights is that in these intense, emotionally charged events, the first story that gets told is incredibly powerful. But it's almost never the whole story. The rush to give a simple answer can often just cover up a much more complicated truth.
And that really leaves us with one big question to think about, doesn't it? When the facts are this murky and so much is unknown, why does the first official narrative matter so much? And what's the real cost of being first with the story instead of being right?